And we move on to emergency 911 calls that have become the focal point of the George Zimmerman trial and defense case in the Sanford, Florida attorneys. They're trying to pinpoint just who can be heard screaming for help on the audio tape. As we continue our coverage of the killing of Trayvon Martin, the trial of George Zimmerman, Monday afternoon, for the first time, jurors heard from Trayvon Martin's father. Tracy Martin told jurors Sanford police detectives played this 911 call for him 2 days after his son's death. It included the sound of the fatal gunshot.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes.
All right, what is your phone number?
There's gunshots.
I was listening to his life being taken, and I was trying to come to grips that Trayvon was here no more.
The murder trial is now focused on who is yelling for help on that recording. Was it Martin or Zimmerman? Family members of both men have testified and disagreed. Chris Serino, the lead investigator, recalled playing the tape for Martin's father and his immediate reaction.
Is that your son's voice in the background? Or something? I think I said a little differently than that, but I inquired as if that was, in fact, his son yelling for help. He looked away and under his breath, as I interpreted, said no.
Tracy Martin testified he has heard that recording 20 times since the shooting and is now convinced that voice was his son. He remembers his initial reaction differently than the police.
And what was your response?
I kind of pushed away from the table and just kind of shook my head and said, I can't tell.
To watch today's court proceedings, with us is criminal defense attorney Paul Martin and NYU journalism professor Pamela Newkirk, and we want to thank both of you for being with us. Appreciate it. Of course, yesterday on the stand, probably the big headline was Tracy Martin, Trayvon Martin's father, testifying for the defense as the defense makes their case. Let's go ahead and listen to a little bit of what he had to say, talk about its impact on the back end. This is Tracy Martin, Trayvon Martin's father.
I was listening to my son's last cry for help. I was listening to his life being taken. And I was trying to come to grips that Trayvon was here no more. It was just tough.
In addition to this, the defense pressed Tracy Martin as a result of Chris Serino's testimony, saying that he had said it was not Trayvon Martin's scream on that 911 tape. And of course, Tracy Martin said, no, I didn't say it wasn't him. I just said it wasn't sure. How much of an impact did his testimony that you saw have on this case? Let's start with you, Paul.
Well, it's always powerful to put the parents of the deceased on the stand. In this situation, it's a little ironic that the defense is doing it, but the point was they wanted to bring out the inconsistencies in the testimony in that previously he wasn't sure whose voice it was.
And you know, I get why the defense wants to use Tracy Martin. What I don't understand, Pamela, maybe you can weigh in on this, is why the prosecution didn't use Tracy Martin. And they used so many other witnesses sort of to preempt the defense. Why not Tracy Martin?
Yeah, it's a little curious that that they would not have used him. He brought emotion to this case that up until now has been missing. I mean, we've focused on Zimmerman, but not on Trayvon and the victim, and I thought his testimony was pretty powerful just from an emotional point of view.
It was also very interesting. There was a long line of witnesses yesterday, defense witnesses, that testified that the scream on that 911 call was in fact George Zimmerman, starting with his mother, going on to his uncle, going on to John Donnelly, a family friend who was sort of like a mentor. So is the defense trying to rack up the numbers, thinking all of them mean more than Sabrina Fulton?
Well, they're going to say, of course, a father is going to say what's best for his son's case or the memory of his son. So they will basically cast light that don't believe what he's saying now, believe what he said earlier. And all these other individuals, they don't have any reason not to lie. They're going to come in here and tell you that this is George Zimmerman because they believe it is George Zimmerman.
But they do have a reason to lie. I mean, his family especially, they have a reason because his whole defense hinges on believing that he was, you know, his life was in danger, and that's why he killed him. But I think either way, it raises doubt you know, to have so many people saying it was Zimmerman, and then to have some, you know, people saying that it was Trayvon. So I think it's a wash in the end. The jury may not be able to rely on that at all. So there will be other things that come into play. As you said, the discrepancies, in the many discrepancies in Zimmerman's testimony.
The problem with a wash, and I agree with you 100%, the problem with a wash is, with a defense, you want a wash.
Right.
Because that means that they haven't proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Precisely. And I think that's what they're doing, though. I think that they are raising that doubt. So with reasonable doubt, the wash, that is in the favor of the defense.
Sure.
And by the way, of course, the trial is going on right now, live from Sanford, Florida, and we do have pictures we can put up right now. Is a gentleman by the name of Shoemaker who is talking about animation that he created that sort of recreates the crime scene. I want to talk about that in a second, but let's go back. You just raised a very interesting point, and that is about what the defense is trying to achieve. I understand from the research that I read, Paul, that you feel like the prosecution really isn't trying to get a conviction. That seems like a strong statement.
Well, I think it's obvious from the witnesses that weren't called and the witnesses that were called, they seem to be mailing in this prosecution. I would have called the father the first witness. I would have, right after this opening statements, put in the emotion and then bring in your technical witnesses. But I don't call the best friend of the defendant in my case in chief. I don't call witnesses that substantiate the defense's case in my case in chief. Let the defense do it. It's a strange way to prosecute a case.
But it seemed a little bit effective to me, at least, in that best friend, Chad Johnson was his name, was a little, you know, he's a little 17, 18-year-old kid. He looked like a kid, and it helped me remember Trayvon Martin was a kid.
Right, as did his brother. The day that his brother testified, it reminded you that we're talking about a kid.
We are talking about a kid. And speaking of kids, kids do what kids do. And there was argument yesterday about whether or not the judge would allow in the toxicology report of Trayvon Martin after he was shot. And of course, the toxicology report showed that there were some traces of THC, I believe it is, which is a metabolite of marijuana. And the judge allowed the toxicology report in. What kind of effect does that have on this case?
Well, from a legal standpoint, the impression given is that he is not the quote-unquote good kid. He's a young man that's out here smoking marijuana, doing bad things, and the type who would incite violence. And that's the impression or the inference that's given to this jury. Legally, what his basis is, I'm not really sure why they had it in, because at the time of the incident, there was no indication that he had marijuana on him, how long ago beforehand this situation took place. So it seems like an iffy area.
It really is a curious ruling, isn't it, Pamela? Because the judge did not allow the photos that were found on Trayvon Martin's phone, photos of him blowing smoke, photos of him holding a gun, or a hand holding a gun. To allow this, isn't that a contradiction?
I think so, and I don't see what legal basis it has in this case. What difference does it make if he smoked marijuana an hour before he was killed?
So what can the prosecution do to sort of neutralize this information?
Well, I would call a rebuttal witness to say, basically, one, that marijuana doesn't make you a violent individual. If anything, it has the opposite effect. And I also would call a witness to show that based upon the toxicology report, we can't tell how long it was from the time that he smoked the marijuana until the time of this incident.
And are they doing toxicological reports on Zimmerman? It seems to me that Zimmerman is the one who's on trial, and I don't know why Trayvon would be on trial in this case. Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin, not the other way around. So I don't even see what the basis would be to look at whether or not he ever smoked marijuana.
Well, I think that goes to many opinions that the prosecution is, what would be your words? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Mailing it in.
Mailing it in. I was going to say blowing it, but in that regard, another very interesting witness yesterday was John Donnelly, close friend of George Zimmerman, says that he's known him for a long time, taught him how to tie a Windsor knot. And he's also a war veteran, and said that he had heard many men cry in agony, scream in agony, and so he supposedly has this ability to identify screaming voices to their owner. How can he make that assertion without objection when the prosecution couldn't use expert audio technicians to analyze the voice?
Well, I would have objected to the testimony even coming in. I'm not sure. For one, you're absolutely right. He wasn't deemed an expert, so he can't give an expert opinion. There was no basis in fact for him to come to these conclusions, definitely based upon the decisions of the court. So I would have objected. I would have asked for that testimony to be precluded. And now that it's out, you can't put the toothpaste back in. But I would ask that evidence be stricken from the transcript, and the jurors not be allowed to consider it.
On another matter, you know, the attorneys on both sides, and in fact, Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, the parents of Trayvon Martin, said just before the trial that race was not to be injected into this trial, that this was not about race. But isn't it really about race?
It's all about race. Race is what started this case to begin with. If Trayvon Martin had been a white kid walking through that neighborhood, it's pretty unlikely that Zimmerman would have followed him. It's even more unlikely that if he followed him, he would have ended up shooting him in the heart. So this trial is all about race, and this trial, it's almost as if Americans are watching two different trials. I think African Americans, when they look at this trial, there's a history that is layered beneath it that informs how they're, you know, listening to the testimony. When the police officer, Sereno, when he said that he believed Zimmerman was credible, African Americans, many African Americans probably said, of course you would say that, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost as if, but this jury is not an African American jury.
Right.
So they're watching a complete, they may as well have a different channel on. We're watching different shows.
Yeah, you make a very, very interesting point. We're going to stop right there. We want you guys to hang around. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back and talk to you a little bit later. Paul Martin, Pamela Newkirk, thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.